World of Warcraft be like, choose your villain. Native orphan Turkish kid with anger issues. Severely abused undead woman with unconventional ways of showing emotion. Outcasted disabled indigenous orc that got enslaved. Discriminated against feminine elf man with an addiction. A tortured black dragon that only speaks of agony, pain and hatred. Disabled indigenous troll chieftain that got his land conquered. Just a native Naga witch woman. So, welcome queers! I'm January or Scratch. I'm an artist, a 2D animator, a character and costume designer, and a million more things. In this video, I'll be redesigning WoW characters. This is a big project consisting of redesigning 18 characters and putting them into 5 groups. So this will be a 5-episode series, and in a video, I will be focusing on one group. This series consists of the Betrayed, the Alliance plus Ration, Thrall's Fan Club, the Family Horde, and the Traditional Horde. I try to stay as close to the original as possible while remaking and fixing the glaring issues with some of the characters' designs, and I also only did characters I was passionate about. I split them into groups intentionally to show more of their personality and the dynamics and chemistry between them and other characters. So in this video, I'll be drawing Garrosh, Vol'jin, and Cairne. Okay, I'm so excited, this is where I really get to shine. Not that I don't shine all the time, but this is my favorite part. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, I recommend you do because it will give you more context, and I've purposefully chosen the order of this series, so it's better to watch them in order to get the full experience. Garrosh is one of my favorite characters in WoW, so I'm very excited to analyze and restore him. This is going to be a deep dive into Garrosh, and I want to bring a perspective to him that I haven't really seen anybody share in this community. So enjoy this interesting take on this character. First, let's establish a few disclaimers. Okay, so why do I like Garrosh Hellscream? Garrosh is undeniably an extremely strong character with unbendable spirit. Let's look into his upbringing. His culture is grounded in honor, justice and pride. But like any other culture, that comes with shame, guilt and fear. Garrosh lost both his parents in his childhood, and the only person that took care of him was Great Mother Gaia, who was struggling with her health. He was raised with the shame of his father's mistakes, with the fear of his guardian dying, of him leading his people into the same dark path as his father, and with the guilt of something he didn't do and couldn't have possibly prevented. And the American male gaze of this story is obvious here because while it does represent real things, the author absolutely cannot understand them. Garrosh's depression and trauma aren't treated seriously enough, and they're a reason to poke fun at him for being inactive and mock him for feeling shame, especially as an orcish man. All the culture in WoW has passed through the eyes of a colonizer and it has lost the soul and weight of its real origin. But I know what it is trying to portray. Shame and guilt are extremely heavy words, and they always result in fear. And while I will always advocate for the fact that these feelings only poison, that they do no good and all people should deconstruct them in their minds, there was a reason for them to exist. Because in a community, a person's wrongdoings have consequences. Consequences that colonizers with no culture never get to feel, because they have no guilt, shame, or fear. And while I don't support raising children like that, within a culture it worked, and it made sense. Orcish culture values honor above all, and honor means justice. In essence, Garrosh's guilt is honorable, even though he did nothing wrong, because it shows he cares, and it shows he knows how to put responsibility on himself. He knows how to treat himself the way he should others when they do something wrong. But it's entirely misguided, because he did nothing wrong, and mainly because Garrosh is a child. Children have no responsibility, they have no power, they should never be held at the same standard as an adult. But Garrosh can't know that, and he's holding himself accountable as if he is an adult. He was forced to grow up too fast. But there is no such thing as maturing faster. He's still a kid, he can't know better. Yes, he is more knowledgeable, more experienced than an average kid, but he's still a kid nonetheless. He had to be strong when he should have been taken care of. However, even with all of his shame and guilt, Garrosh knows and is still aware that children shouldn't be judged for their parents' mistakes. He is very perceptive, and because of his strong sense of honor, that inevitably pushes him to be truthful. Because justice is the truth, and when you follow justice, you are led to knowledge. So he has very deep-rooted trauma, very harmful and poisonous internalized shame, and no adequate self-perception. But even so, he's very clever, proud, honorable and compassionate. He feels and cares very deeply. The reality of the situation is that Garrosh has no faults in this. What his father did had nothing to do with him. And here I want to talk about Grommash briefly. I want to elaborate on what I scratched the surface of last episode. Let's talk about this Western male gaze I keep mentioning through how Warcraft treats the orcs. Thrall is presented as a reasonable, tactful leader with great patience and knowledge, while Grommash is shown to be stubborn, uncooperative, impulsive, and rushed to the point of being foolish. And with this I want to point out a little trend of what is considered to be a good orc versus a bad orc in WoW. What are some orcs represented as good that come to your mind? Thrall, Aetheric maybe, What are examples of bad orcs? Definitely a lot, but whose evilness would you say was legendary? Gul'dan, Ner'zhul perhaps? What does this mean? Now, I absolutely love Aetheric and he's completely incomparable to Thrall. Aetheric is an actual compassionate person with a soul, but it is important to note the perception of the author. Aetheric is an orc that denounced his community and escaped the toxic space he was in to live in peace, in the meantime befriending a human. Again, don't take it wrong, I love this character and I support his whole journey and this is one of my favorite sub-stories of all, but my point here is to recognize why he's seen as one of the good orcs in this franchise. And that is simply because he was friends with a human. And then here comes a joke. We have Thrall. Why is he a good orc? Well, because he's the savior of the brutal savage orcs, of course. He's the one that civilized them. He's the digestible token orc that has so many alliance friends and is an actual diplomat. In contrast to that, the bad orcs are Gul'dan, one of the only disabled characters in WoW that try to turn to the elements, but the elements are also apparently ableist in this world, so they rejected him. He got so mistreated and felt so helpless and desperate that he turned to demon stuff to actually help himself, because nobody fucking cared. Surely it's just in his genes that he's so evil, and definitely isn't the fact that he has no space in this world, so he tried to make it. What about Ner'zhul? Bro, I opened his Wikipedia page to back up my claims and this is the first thing I see. Be for real. Anyways, he's also a very tortured soul that got deceived to make a fucking blood pact with Kil'jaeden and in result to allow his people to get enslaved by the Legion. By the way, he betrayed the Legion later, he entirely went for a path of his own, but surely it's also in his nature to be a piece of shit since he tried all types of ways to help his people because he felt so trapped and powerless. Am I saying these characters did nothing wrong? No, they did awful stuff. Extremely nuanced, however. But I'm pointing out who they are as people and how much that matters in the story. See how the good orcs are the ones that got human approval and the bad orcs are the ones that were mistreated and tried to save their nation somehow? That's how the story separates the orcs. The typical evil orcs that are brute and reckless and more connected to their community versus the evolved orcs that are patient and diplomatic and have human friends. No matter how we look at it, orcs are supposed to be a native peoples. Their initial inspiration were the Mongols, and the general idea of the orcs now is just a warrior tribe. But the authors and the Alliance view them as outlandish savages. This concept of otherworldly people that don't belong in our world, and in this case Azeroth, doesn't exist. And again, don't hit me with it's supposed to be fantasy. No, it's just racism. This specific attitude the story has towards the orcs is only observed from colonizing nations towards indigenous people. So together with that, Garrosh is shown exactly like this typical orc in quotations. And what the lesson of this story was shown to be is that he was too impulsive and aggressive, and that pushed him to give away his people's free will because he was that power hungry. What the actual takeaway here is that Garrosh was wary of the humans, which is fully reasonable, and from his huge desire to protect his people, he opposed the Warchief by not wanting to risk it and attacked the humans first in Kalimdor, which is where the problem lies. Grom shouldn't have attacked them, indeed, but his distrust should have been understood by the Warchief. Thrall, as a leader, should be able to understand his people, their needs, their wants. He should listen to them and he should find appropriate solutions that they also agree with. But he is not a good leader. He didn't understand Grom, he didn't even try to understand Grom, and in fact he punished him for his mistake, resulting in Grommash feeling completely misunderstood and frustrated. Is Grommash at fault for drinking demon blood and once again devoting the orcs to the Legion? Yes, he is. But Thrall has a play in this too. Yet the story never acknowledges his failed duty as a leader, which is the most powerful position in a community. Grommash, after that, sacrifices his life to kill the demon that enslaved him and he liberates his people. Garrosh, though, doesn't learn of his redemption until Thrall tells him of it. Now, Thrall is an essential character in Garrosh's arc. He appears in his life by telling him the full story of his father's heroic death, and he fuels his pride. This is already set on a flawed path, because, once again, Thrall might have some orcish values, but his connection to the culture is not nearly as deep as Garrosh's. He doesn't understand his guilt, and he cannot empathize adequately. And the point of comforting Garrosh should have never been that his father was a great person after all. The point should have been that Garrosh is his own person, and he shouldn't feel responsible for the actions of his father. He should know his history, but he shouldn't be bound by it. While Thrall buttering him up with his father's glory is doing exactly that, chaining him to his past. Garrosh, though, at that moment is critically vulnerable, and Thrall's encouragement is the only thing that he has the option to trust. He's in an awful headspace, he's very conflicted and very easily influenced, and the Warchief, the most honorable person that he admires so much, is motivating him and praising him. In such a state of mind, with his current situation, the only expected result of him is to develop a flawed source of confidence and an unhealthy bond to Thrall. which is entirely Thrall's fault. A tiny bracket here, Garrosh is undeniably younger than Thrall, and I'm not buying the bullshit that Wall came up with that he's older. His father, Grommash, used to call Thrall little brother, and Thrall called Garrosh boy a bunch of times. What kind of young person calls older people boy? Like, the fuck? So anyways, realistically, Garrosh here should be about 16 to 19. So, a teenager, a kid. Garrosh has no guardians other than Great Mother Gaia, who is taking care of the whole village, and she can't give Garrosh that care that he needs, and she is also dying. So here Thrall comes in his life as a mentor, prompting him to join him and be his right hand. Now, both these characters are quite ignorant, but one has power and the other doesn't. I'm completely aware that Thrall isn't consciously being evil, and he doesn't know he's being an alliance handkerchief, that he's being used as a weapon. He's just ignorant, but that doesn't matter at all, because he has the power to do all of this damage. The fact that he's being manipulated and conditioned to act like a human man doesn't make him act less like a human man. We, as the viewer, know Thrall isn't a competent leader, and we know he's taking advantage of Garrosh, but Garrosh can't know that. He's a fucking kid, and he's extremely emotionally unstable right now. So he idolizes Thrall, gets his confidence back now that he's supported by the Warchief, and comes along with him. In Orgrimmar, Garrosh sees the miserable conditions his people live in, where all the food is imported because the soil makes it impossible to grow crops, and his people's survival is entirely dependent on trade. He sees the lush forests of Ashenvale that is being guarded by the Night Elves who refuse to trade with them. So first of all, this right here makes no sense. This behavior is extremely uncharacteristic coming from the Night Elves, basing them off of Warcraft 3. They're nature's protectors. They fight those who cause it destruction, not those who utilize it. They're a tribe, not a civilization. And they have no claim over a land. They care for all the land. The story from here, however, completely ruins their premise. They make them out to be these pure nature fetishists, and from what we see onward, they just use nature as a fucking decoration because they think cutting a tree, planting a vegetable, and integrating yourself within nature, living off of it, is defiling it. And this behavior isn't observed in any indigenous tribe. This behavior is only observed from rich weirdos. We're not supposed to leave nature untouched and pure. Everybody needs and deserves to live in it, in harmony with it, not despite it. And surprise, nature has cycles. Leaves fall, things decay, animals die. That is part of life, and wishing for it to stop cycling, to be virgin and perfect and stale, is ugly, dangerous, and a fetish. So that out of the way, if the Night Elves were genuine nature protectors like how they were shown to be in Warcraft 3, they would value all life and not only their life, so they would protect nature, and nature includes the orcs. So they would have allowed them the survival they require, because they don't have dominion over a land. That's the point. And even if you consider that, yeah, the orcs once tried to fuck over nature, so the Night Elves are unforgiving and they don't want to give them the chance to do it again, right? Well, as I said, they don't have dominion over nature, so wrong. But even if they did, this can be fixed with one fucking conversation from Thrall. That's the job of a leader, to make sure there is no danger from the inner or the outer circle of his people's space. But WoW decides to retcon that, and now the Night Elves become an evil rich civilization with an obsession for purity and nature. So that is how I will be treating them from now on, because they are far too gone. So Garrosh has the full right to want to forcefully take the means to his people's survival. Do I agree with him? Almost fully yes, but I do have a question. Isn't Mulgore a massive area? How come the Tauren and the Orcs aren't living in it together? It has more than enough to provide for both. And the Tauren are hospitable people. They also understand balance and harmony well. I'm sure they would have even suggested that the Orcs aid themselves with their resources, considering it's entirely Thrall who made it possible for them to live there in the first place. So my doubt isn't directed at the Tauren. It's directed at Thrall. Because this conversation is leading me to believe Thrall is purposefully punishing his people for getting enslaved and used by the Legion by making them suffer in a land they cannot thrive in so they can get humbled. That is absolutely deranged, and I can't and do not wish to even begin talking about it. So Garrosh is fully correct here, however Thrall disagrees. It is here that they begin clashing on worldviews and morals. Something that is important to note is that Thrall's human influence could be turned into a plus. Unlike the rest of the orcs, he understands how humans think, and he can take advantage of that. His so-called diplomacy could be useful to negotiate with others, and especially the Alliance. So Thrall in theory could still be useful if he wanted to be. After all, it is a leader's job to be able to communicate with other peoples and prevent conflict when possible. And he should know that. But instead of acknowledging it, accepting it, and doing his job, he turns it against Garrosh and faults Garrosh for not being diplomatic like him. He lectures and takes him on meetings with humans to fix Garrosh instead of just accepting that Garrosh is not a diplomat and just taking on that role himself for the better of everyone. As a teacher, a mentor, a guide, your job is to help your student find themselves, to help them along the path they want to go on, to use teaching methods that they can understand, practice, and enjoy. You're supposed to evolve them into a better version of themselves. But Thrall is a horrible teacher, and he isn't thinking of what's best for Garrosh. He isn't taking care of or guiding Garrosh at all. He's only criticizing him in what he thinks he lacks in. Thrall doesn't want to help Garrosh become a better Garrosh. He wants to make him a second Thrall. So a bunch of events happen and Garrosh stays completely unshakable in his beliefs. He only gets more radicalized the more Thrall insists on changing him. And I talked a lot about Garrosh's emotional state and his trauma, but it's time to talk about his personality. He's a very persistent and solid character. He's incredibly resilient. Even when he was at his worst, he never faltered in his morals and core. Nobody should go through what he did, but he did. And not only did he survive it, he managed to come out of it more alive than ever, even with the scars he was left with. He might have a lot of internalized self-doubt and hatred, but him picking himself up is a show that his beliefs and hunger for justice are stronger than his trauma. That is power. That is passion, that is love and justice. So even though he is a kid in an awful environment with a horrible teacher, Garrosh shows incredible willpower and strong character. So he keeps standing up for his beliefs and he doesn't shut up or conform to his surroundings. And extremely important to note is that he's surrounded by very big people, and I don't mean physically. The people around him are very experienced, wise and worthy. Saurfang, Aetheric, Cairne, Vol'jin, Sylvanas and others. Yet even in front of these giants he stands his ground. So later, Thrall leaves Garrosh in charge of leading the Horde forces to Northrend. They had a huge fight over it, both verbal and physical, but they got interrupted and so then Thrall just allowed Garrosh access to his plan. This once again shows immense incompetence on Thrall's part. As a leader and a mentor, you never let your student take charge when you're unsure in them, especially giving them the lead while at the same time telling them that you have little faith in them and you can't see them succeeding. That only spawns massive insecurity and doubt in your student, and it poisons them entirely. They might have actually been suited to do it, but it's all in the mental, and if you, their teacher, discourage them, they will not perform healthily or show their actual abilities. So Thrall just keeps fucking up as a teacher, and that is critical for Garrosh's development. Just to slightly talk about Thrall, this is probably where I stop respecting him, but later on he will be quite literally spiritually dead to me. So far he has an option of redemption. But you can't have so much power, be this ignorant and do this much damage. You should see you're unfit to use that power, and if you don't give it away, it should be taken away from you forcefully. I won't go in detail for Cairne and Vol'jin because I'll focus on Garrosh's point of view first, but a whole bunch of events happen where Garrosh keeps getting tested by the people around him and everybody opposes him. The only people Garrosh lets get to him though are Thrall and Saurfang, and he is actually quite discriminatory in who he listens to. Now, Garrosh has an immense connection to his culture, and because he knows his people's history, he is reluctant to accept critique from anybody but orcs. That, as I've said before, is a legitimate defense mechanism that could turn into prejudice. But if you're in a dangerous environment, prejudice is of your last concerns, and your priority should be your survival. And precisely because Garrosh is in the position of an oppressed person, he shouldn't be blamed for it. But the nuance comes in when Thrall gives power to Garrosh. Garrosh has a lot of harmful internalized ideals, and it is Thrall's responsibility as a mentor to guide him and help him heal and learn from them. So it is Thrall's fault, once again, that he didn't moderate that discrimination. Now, what would have been the best course of action in such a situation? Both Cairne and Vol'jin are fulfilling their duty as leaders in trying to lead the Horde better, but Garrosh holds prejudice against them and he doesn't want to listen to them. It is not on them that this has to be fixed. It is on Thrall and Saurfang, as people older and wiser that share Garrosh's culture, that they are supposed to teach him better. And this is where the writing fails. It fails in actually representing culture appropriately. Because yes, Thrall is a doofus, indeed. We know he isn't an actual problem solver. It's realistic that in the canon he didn't fix anything. But Saurfang is shown as a really experienced and wise orc. And orc is underlined. He takes pride in his culture and he understands it deeply. So he, as a second mentor to Thrall, is responsible for keeping him in check. And he did indeed keep him in check. He threatened Garrosh to kill him himself if he stepped in his father's footsteps. This is why World of Warcraft sucks, because yes, it did represent something real, but it completely failed to get the point. Here, what would happen if this was a real situation is that first of all, Saurfang wouldn't have stopped at threatening Garrosh, and I don't think this is a bad action on his part. This threat in quotations is not as brutal as it sounds. Orcs are a warrior tribe, this is a way to show seriousness and weight, consequences in his words. But if it was real, this wouldn't have cut it. Saurfang is a wise person, but also a parent. He would actually care about Garrosh, both as a leader that is afraid of the inexperienced students' mistakes when they take lead, but also as an orcish parent that wants to see the new generation thrive. He knows how to take care of children of all age ranges, and as a parent and as a mentor, he would have coached Garrosh in all types of ways. Verbal, physical, on topics of battle, but also of life. To be an honorable warrior is to be a good person. And these lessons would open Garrosh's mind to things he hadn't even considered before, because that's the job of a teacher. It would have been inevitable for Garrosh to actually get educated and unlearn his internalized bullshit, because there is no other realistic option. Garrosh is genuinely open to learn, even though he's stubborn, and if an orc taught him appropriately, he would have evolved past his prejudice. Also, if Thrall did that, even better, it would have been even easier for Garrosh to absorb, because Thrall is a parental figure to him. He is the person Garrosh seeks approval from. But Saurfang would have also been able to do it, because Garrosh really respects him. So WoW fails to write that realistically, and okay, sure, we continue on with Garrosh being prejudiced, which I'm emphasizing is Thrall's responsibility still, not Garrosh's. It is Thrall that is giving power to Garrosh that he can take away from him at any point. So we arrive at one of the worst writing mistakes of WoW. Something happens and the spirits are disturbed, so Thrall has to leave to calm them down or whatever because he's the best self-proclaimed shaman. And before he leaves the horde, which in real life would correspond to an abusive father leaving his child, he has to bestow the Warchief title to someone else. He had reserved that to Dranosh, Saurfang's son, but unfortunately he died in Northrend, and his second best option was Cairne, but he decides that it has to be an orc for some fucking reason and brushes away the idea. Before we get to Garrosh, another really important topic I want to turn attention to is leadership. In media, leadership and responsibility has been greatly villainized with tropes like kings running away from their kingdoms, princesses fleeing from the burdens of inheriting power, kids of CEOs refusing to take on their parents' position, and that is represented as good and healthy in a lot of these cases. That is a very dangerous mindset. All of these cases involve ridiculous amount of power over other people's lives. In this cruel system, and especially with monarchy, nepotism, and classism, if a person is born with power, they need to use it well. And that can mean learning on how to use it better, or giving it away to someone more suited than them. They can't just fuck off to somewhere and wash their hands by saying they didn't abuse their power. By freeing this spot of power, they're giving it away to fate. And fate is most likely somebody much worse than them. And by being complicit, they support the misuse of this power. They are required to give that power to someone that will know how to wield it. Leadership shouldn't be a burden, and if it feels like one, the person isn't suited for the role, which is perfectly fine. But running away from their responsibilities is abusing power. So that established, Thrall can't just fuck off to somewhere. It is very irresponsible, regardless of the circumstances. And especially because he doesn't have a backup plan of who is to replace him. So he makes the worst decision ever by giving the Warchief title to Garrosh. Even from his own point of view, this is screaming disaster, because he and Garrosh do not agree on almost anything, and he thinks Garrosh is reckless and aggressive. Yet, because he doesn't care enough, he still goes for it. Garrosh responds to him that he finds himself unfit to rule, because he belongs on the battlefield and knows little of politics. But Thrall pushes his decision and promises Cairne, Vol'jin, and Aetheric would advise him where he lacked in. Garrosh agrees and takes the role of the Warchief. There is a sick power imbalance between Garrosh and Thrall, and in no universe would this ever be consensual. Garrosh literally has no choice but to accept. From his perspective, even though he himself said he shouldn't be and doesn't want to be the Warchief, his life's virtue is honor, and if Thrall himself bestowed this title to him, who is he to refuse? He admires Thrall, and if Thrall thinks Garrosh should be the Warchief, he trusts him, even though he doesn't trust in himself. Don't think I haven't forgotten that Garrosh is a fucking child. Children cannot consent. Period. Point blank. Full stop. But sure, he's grown since Nagrand. A few years have passed, he should be like around 17 to 20. He's still in the transition era of becoming an adult. He isn't an adult yet. And even if we disregard Garrosh's character, a child or a transitioning adult should never be in the position of power. It is cruel and insane to put any kind of power or responsibility on them. And no, I won't entertain the idea that Garrosh is older than Thrall. Media literacy has been ritually killed if you believe that even for a second. So the writing really derails from here on. But don't worry, it gets much worse. Take into account that an American man is writing this story, so all of the characters are just as delusional as the author. So Garrosh isn't treated like a child by any of the people that should know how to treat children with care. It is in all of the Taurens, and in particular Cairne's nature and culture, to care for kids. Yet, as I said, everything cultural in this game is misrepresented, so that gets completely erased and undermined. I seriously do not feel like going in depth about Cairne's mak'gora, but here it comes briefly. The Tauren get really wronged and Cairne accuses Garrosh to be at fault. He wasn't, and that gets cleared up, but Cairne's perception of Garrosh completely stabilizes and he loses all respect for him. So he challenges him to a mak'gora, which is a duel till defeat, to take the Warchief title. Garrosh accepts and ups the stakes by making it a battle till death, once again proving his determination. If I become delusional all of a sudden and take that Garrosh isn't a kid, this would actually be a great course of action coming from Cairne, because I completely agree that Garrosh isn't a suitable leader and that the Tauren chieftain is much more competent. But I am not delusional, and Garrosh and Cairne have at least a 30-year age gap, and it is insane to entertain the idea that the Tauren chieftain, who is an old man, has less power than the orcish kid that just got here. Whatever angle you look at it from, this cannot happen, especially with the fact that everybody is in unison that they don't like Garrosh as a leader but also as a person, and they are all on Cairne's side and can extremely easily take him down from power. Whatever, here comes ridiculous writing mistake number 6 million, and Cairne dies in the duel because an evil Tauren poisoned Garrosh's weapon. Garrosh is completely distraught when he learns that he was robbed of his honor and he stole Cairne's honor by battling him unfairly, which once again just keeps proving how compassionate, devoted and just Garrosh is. At this point, shit hits the fan, and as I promised you, it gets much worse. I am no longer even going to explore Garrosh's actual character and his actions from here on. I find no further nuance or lesson in entertaining Western fantasy, so let's talk about how insane this writing is instead. Garrosh becomes a tyrant ruler that completely abuses his power in every way he can. He starves his people even though he was the biggest advocate for giving them resources. He puts all of his focus on military forces, in the meantime destroying nature, even though he grew up in Nagrand with Great Mother Gaia raising him and his culture relying on shamans who are in tune with the elements, so nature. He also starts only caring about conquering more land, wages war on the Alliance as much as he can, pretty sure he commits genocide, and he becomes brutally racist even to the other members of the Horde. In short, he just turns into a Western colonizer. I think I've established how that makes zero sense for Garrosh's personality or worldview, but I want to stress that a native person with honor as a virtue would never ever forsake honor. They would rather die than betray their life virtue, and all of the things that colonizer Garrosh does, that I listed earlier, are dishonorable. A corporate Western man wouldn't blink an eye when forsaking everything for power, and that's why they project that shit onto Garrosh. Yet Garrosh literally somehow managed to revive himself for a second with that Cromgar cinematic. I advise everybody to watch it if you haven't already. Kudos to that quest giver. They understood the assignment. Reminder to drink some water, unclench your muscles and relax. Let me tell you a little story of my own background. I'm Bulgarian, and my people got colonized by the Ottoman Empire. We were enslaved for 500 years. Even with the torture my people had to face daily, the Bulgarian culture, language and spirit survived. The empire burned most of our history and they tried to ethnically wipe us out. But there were people, revolutionaries, in my language called awakeners, that fought for our freedom. They didn't fight for our independence, they fought for freedom. Because they knew, as people who have suffered, that they weren't the only ones. And they knew that everybody deserves human rights, not only a certain ethnicity. And they managed to liberate our people from under Ottoman rule, because they were radical, uncompromising, and they weren't only saying pretty words. They were organized and they actually did actions. Afterwards, of course, we got pitied and we became a Western project and got new colonized again. These freedom fighters, we learn about them in our culture. They're part of our history, and some are known by our whole nation, but there's many others that only we know of, the kids of our ancestors, because they were our own grandparents, and we Bulgarians view them as heroes because they were and are heroes. However, anywhere outside of Bulgaria, and especially in the West, these revolutionaries are viewed as and called terrorists, because history is written by the victors. My people never wronged anyone. They didn't enslave or abuse other peoples. They didn't mass harm nature or wildlife. They only fought back when the oppressors came in their lands and tried to force their erasure. And this is only my people. There is thousands of other native people that have gone through or are going through the same right now. And what I'm trying to explain here is that Garrosh in this story is a revolutionary representative. In the same way Westerners who write my history say our freedom fighters were terrorists, Westerners write their own little stories and call characters inspired by native people terrorists. This is all just a gaze, an agenda, because that's how the West sees natives. They're afraid of them and they project their twisted mindset onto them, because every accusation is a confession. A native person could never even imagine of doing half the damage the colonizers have already been doing for thousands of years. And Garrosh could never in his wildest dreams become a world ruler, Lord Supreme, Azeroth's dictator. It is just not how it works. And even if we disregard Garrosh's child status, he might be physically strong, but pretend however much you want, he cannot withstand the individual power, let alone the combined power of Cairne, Thrall, Vol'jin, and Saurfang. It is sick and twisted and disgusting that this story pretends an orphaned native kid with parent issues could ever become the most powerful and dangerous villain on earth. And with all of this insanity they make Garrosh do, the story pretends it's his anger issues that caused it. This is another topic I really want to speak on. Anger issues. The most villainized flaw in quotations. Anger mismanagement, the same way with any other mental instability, is a coping mechanism that the mind resorts to when in danger. And yes, like anything else, it can be harmful. But Garrosh is being absolutely devoured by everyone around him. Not a singular person has shown this kid kindness in this story. And you're expecting him to not have anger issues and to already know how to deal with his emotion as a barely adult person? Anger is an emotion like any other. If utilized, it doesn't have to result in hurt. But just because the system, and in translation, the ruling class, rich people, are afraid of poor people's wrath, they villainized and tabloized it. I can only say Garrosh's anger is admirable. It is another show of strength because anger results in action. It is one of the most powerful energy sources, and Garrosh is all about action. He's rebelling against everything he finds unjust, which is exactly what a revolutionary does. His anger has saved him from erasure, from getting overpowered and assimilated. People resisting don't want more power. They want their power back. They want their freedom back. And Garrosh wanted his and his people's freedom back. Instead, he got colonized by the authors. And whoo! With this amount of outrage I've been gathering this whole video, let's talk about Thrall and Garrosh's mak'gora. When I first watched this cinematic, I barely knew anything about Garrosh. I only knew him as a maniacal supremacist that the whole community hates. But that was the time where I was getting severely radicalized, and I've always been radical. So during that time I was getting really educated on the world and history, and I was getting gradually more frustrated with WoW as I learned about all the lore details that I didn't know of. And at that point I had realized that the Alliance is just the West. It's just the colonizers, so I had completely dismantled that. But I still knew nothing of Garrosh, so I viewed him as a villain. So with that mindset, I watched the cinematic. I was with my siblings, Riven and Vihar, and when the video ended, silence entirely overtook our room. We all looked at each other and we just couldn't say anything. The air felt so fucking heavy. And as we started talking about it, I cried. This shitty fucking cinematic made me re-experience all the times I've seen a freedom fighter get performatively and inhumanly murdered. I didn't even know Garrosh's story back then. I literally only knew him as a fucking villain. But I felt it. I know this feeling. I've gone through it. I felt the injustice. I felt the weight of history, the weight of the empire. And you can't take that away from an oppressed native person. This little short film is the one and only worst creations of WoW, and it is as cruel as it gets. Garrosh's lines are so fucking gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. And dear Mother Nature, Garrosh's voice actor acted his soul away. I get chills just thinking about it.
You made me Warchief! You left me to pick up your pieces! You failed me! You made me what I am!
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is real. They genuinely represented the reality of a native kid that got completely mistreated by the Alliance, by his own people, by his own parental figure, let out his rage, grief, and power. Yet guess who won? And guess who got to write it down? Thrall. And it is even better that he fucking cheated, because he has never been fair. The system has never been fair. They only know how to exploit, destroy, and abuse. And to wrap up the picture, they made them fight alone. Nobody to witness what went on. Because you bet your fucking ass if a singular orc saw Thrall cheat on this mak'gora, they would have ritually killed him. But he's a coward, a piece of shit, a slimy excuse of a person. And because Garrosh is all about honor, he fought fairly in a battle he never had the option of winning. But there is no room for honor when rebelling and taking down the oppressors. They've never played fair, and if you're fighting them with honor, you've lost. Honor means respect, and the oppressors are not to be respected. So one last thing that wraps up Garrosh's saga was his brief appearance in the dookiest expansion of all time, Shadowlands, where he got tortured for giggles. Now, please tell me when and where have you seen Q Jaden or Monoroth or Enzoth or Soggy Yogi or any other purely evil, unnuanced villain in WoW get tormented and abused just for laughs? When have you seen them be a punching bag for mockery? Never, and you will never see it, because the American male authors respect the comically cruel, irredeemable villains more than they respect Garrosh. They fucking hate Garrosh, they want him gone, and they desire to see him miserable to make themselves feel superior. Garrosh might have gotten grandiosely butchered, but he is and will forever be one of the strongest characters in WoW, and I know what Garrosh represents and stands for: native rage and revolution. So fuck all the authors that had literal physical fights over trying to destroy this character, because no matter how much you misrepresent my people, I know what they look like, I know what they sound like, and I know who they are, and you cannot fool me. So what would I have done with Garrosh? First of all, many of these concepts are real, so I would have loved to see them explored, like Thrall being a manipulative parental figure, an incompetent leader, and Garrosh going through the journey of realizing that, detaching himself and healing from it. I would have made Saurfang a genuine wise orc and a second mentor in Garrosh's life, caring for him and directing him through all of this. I would have explored Garrosh indeed becoming the Warchief, even though he's so young and uneducated, because many native people, and oppressed people in general, are forced to be leaders regardless of their abilities or desires. I am unsure on whether I would have made Cairne and Vol'jin be his opposition, because I would like to explore native people being divided due to the manipulation and propaganda that the Westerners, and in this case Thrall, has instilled in them. But at the same time, Garrosh is very young and there is no way Cairne and Vol'jin wouldn't acknowledge that. Regardless, I would make Garrosh actually learn how to lead his people, because as I said, he is extremely compassionate and just. If given the resources of knowledge and care, he would have become an incredible warchief. He would listen to his people because he would understand his duty and power, and his people would respect him, support him, and guide him. And after that, I would have explored the struggles of revolution, organizing, strategizing, and uniting. Okay, so this video is getting rather long, so I won't be exploring Cairne and Vol'jin here, but I do have a lot to say about them, so tell me if I should make a part 2. Now let's get to the designing part, because artistically this was the most enjoyable piece to draw for me. So as I said in the Illidan video, I'm in the process of healing from the beauty standards of media, and this project was a huge step for me. I got to explore and appreciate so many types of bodies and faces, clothes and demeanors. So to start with Vol'jin, I am obsessed with his design, so I kept the hair, the face paint, the jewelry, and even the clothes. I really enjoyed exploring the ethnic features of the trolls, and especially his. I made him have the biggest tusks of almost all trolls because he's the chieftain. I imagine all trolls are pretty tall, so I made him 187 and a bit leaner, even though compared to most trolls, his frame is actually pretty big. I also made his muscles quite defined, and I made his posture very up straight. I had the most freedom with designing Cairne out of all the characters in this series, and that's because he barely has a set design. Every drawing I see of him, he is different, but there were some elements that kept repeating, so I made it a point to include them. I kept his wide broken horns with the ornaments hanging off of them. I made his hair brown with grey hairs in it, his eyes also brown, and his skin dark. I made his hair short, straight and prickly, and I read somewhere in early concept art of the Tauren that every braid of their hair signifies a battle they've won, which I thought was quite fun, so I gave him many braids both in his hair and beard. I had a lot of fun with his face. I made his nose wide and round, his lips full, his eyebrows long and thick, his eyes puffy on the downward part, and he has 2 sets of teeth peeking through. I also kept the nose piercing because I think it's fitting that almost all Tauren have it as a part of their culture. As for his clothes, clothes, I completely made everything up. I don't imagine Cairne caring too much about self-expression through clothes, so I just gave him something practical with only the belt showing his identity as the chieftain, which is simply the Horde logo. I've seen this motif of red and green triangles in Tauren clothing, so I played around with it as well. His posture is a bit bent, but if he straightened up, he would reach 230 because I wanted him to be an absolute mountain of a person with a huge frame. Same way I did with Bane, I didn't give him muscle definition. Most of the times really strong weightlifters are big in every sort of way and they're not skinny like the silly gym beauty aesthetic, so their muscles don't usually show the same way. I imagine the Tauren is really sturdy people, so they're quite heavy. They do live in the mountains after all, and as hikers I imagine balance is of top priority. As for Garrosh, oh, he was so fun to redesign. I imagined orcs to be quite tall and pretty big in frame, but obviously not to the extent of the Tauren. And in that way, Garrosh isn't really the largest of orcs, but he's still pretty big. And so I made him 184. I really wanted to represent a muscular body that is not chiseled and is strong in every area and not only top heavy, because that's how usually it is in media. I also wanted to make him slightly shorter than Thrall but wider and fuller than him. Just the way it is shown in their battles, Garrosh is definitely much stronger than Thrall, both in sheer muscle power but also in technique. And I'm not even kidding, drawing Garrosh and representing such a person healed me so much you have no clue. I'm extremely used to defaulting to making figures with smaller waists, mainly because of the beauty standard, and so actively going against that and drawing a different body than what I'm used to felt really nice. All the characters I drew in here have quite different bodies, but Garrosh was the first one I finished and it was him that actually opened that door for me. That's why this drawing is so special to me. I kept all his original clothes except for the shoulder pads, and the only reason I didn't draw them is just because they're really big and they would have obstructed Cairne and Vol'jin. Otherwise I love them. I'm so proud of the rendering of this piece. In particular, I love how I hinted the thickness of the pants. I imagined it to be fluffy on the inside, so translating that with values was super satisfying. The iron on the belt is also something I'm very proud of. I'm not very experienced in drawing metals and I think I did a spectacular job, so I'm very happy. I kept Garrosh's tattoos, but I added a little bit of my own spice with them, and I also kept all of his piercings. As for his face, I wanted to give him a really angular face shape with sharp cheekbones, a protruding eyebrow ridge, a strong jawline, and a little dip on his chin. I kept the orcish features of a short nose, and I made his quite soft and wide, with the nostrils being upturned. I made his eyes round and I kept the orange tint in them. I made him have one set of teeth exposed, his canines, and I'm not sure if I want that to be variable within every orc or if it is an age thing, but I made both Saurfang and Thrall have two sets of teeth exposed, while Garrosh has only one, so it's up to you on which version you like better. As for the poses, I wanted to show Garrosh's strong and resilient character, where he's standing proud even in the presence of these two very respectable leaders. I wanted to show Vol'jin as confident yet still a bit tight in posture, because in this conflict I feel like he was the most tense, in comparison to Cairne's relaxed confidence and experience where he's even bending down to look at Garrosh. I wanted to draw these two clearly bigger people, and I don't mean physically only, sizing up to Garrosh, who is alone between them and still measuring up to them. However, Garrosh is turned to Cairne fully because he deems him much more respectable and a bigger threat to him. I also wanted to make Garrosh seem extremely standoffish, where this looks like it is just a heated argument, but Garrosh is standing like he's ready to take an attack, in defense mode, steady with his feet on the ground. Cairne is also challenging him with this intense eye contact, and it seems like Vol'jin is the only one talking at the moment. And with this piece in this video, I wanted to represent what divide and conquer means, because this is entirely what this whole story is showcasing. How all the natives turned against one of their own because of ignorance and manipulation. Because it is something that happens. That is why education is so important. Because even though both Cairne and Vol'jin got butchered as well, it would still make sense that they would hold prejudice against Garrosh. And in this situation, Garrosh got the most wronged, mainly because he was a kid, but Vol'jin and Cairne were also greatly oppressed. And at the end of the day, all of this happened because of a singular, incompetent leader acting like a human man that we should be focusing on, named Thrall. And if this was a real situation, it would correspond to the native people trusting that one English speaker in their community that was raised with Western ideologies and privileges, who mansplained them on politics that they were more than competent in already, but they just didn't know the terms and the language. And once again, I want to emphasize that the fault is not on the person that trusted the oppressor, it is the system and the oppressor's fault. So Cairne and Vol'jin are very dear characters to me, regardless. But conflict happens, and I think it is very important to not erase it and to learn from it. So here is the final piece. I really hope you learned something from this video because it was the most difficult one to write as of yet. Whew. But it's my favorite part of the series so far, and I had so much fun drawing, writing, and talking about it. I am really proud of this piece, and I will hold it in a special place in my heart. I also think I represented the characters really well. I think it's a great parallel to Thrall's piece. While Thrall is flexing his biceps, getting his ego stroked, Garrosh has to deal with a whole nation's survival, and his existence is questioned, and he has to explain his humanity every step of the way. But yes, as always, it was a huge step in my own journey, and I want to significantly thank my siblings, Riven and Vichar, for being my only safe space, for supporting me and encouraging me, and being the best guides I could have ever imagined. We are and have always been a team, a family. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Tell me your thoughts in the comments, share this video with your friends, and you can subscribe for more. It helps me a lot as a small creator. You can also support me and my indie team on Patreon so we can afford to not worry about our food, and you can check out our other projects like Vichar and Riven, and me sometimes getting radicalized through playing retail WoW. This whole video was very much about natives, so help Palestinian, Congolese, Sudanese, Armenian, indigenous American people, and so many more people that are suffering right now. We need to focus our energy into the important things, so educate yourself and the ones around you. We need to make a change. It is of utmost priority that we use our voice, our power, to stop this brutal system and treat each other with respect and empathy. Knowledge is love. Luktarugar, bye bye. You know, I should show this video to my grandma. She's literally an orc. Gramush.
Submit to no one! Not you! Not the jailer! And not that coward Thrall! For the